The story was about someone who wanted to work with Thomas Edison, the famous inventor, and not for him. And the difference between the word with and for was, epic, really, and made quite an impact on me. So on my bus journey to London, I remember that weekend very, very clearly thinking, I want to work with Norman Foster. I don't want to work for him.
Subscribe to BlessedArch for your dose of art, architecture, and design, and hit the bell icon so you never miss an update. Hey yo guys, welcome back to BlessedArch. And before starting this video, I would just like to say that we have hit 50k on YouTube. And I know on the surface I might seem very calm, but on the inside I am like this. Welcome back to the channel, guys. Now today's video is extra special, maybe more so than the videos I've already done. It's because I am interviewing today somebody who not just works at a firm but a senior partner, and not just any firm. I'm talking about Foster Plus Partners. Today I am interviewing Narinder Sagoo, who is a senior partner at Foster Plus Partners. I have all my questions prepared, questions about his journey, questions about how he got to Foster Plus Partners, what it is like to work there, what is it like to work with Norman Foster, and what he's like in real life. All of these questions are going to get answered real soon. So without wasting much of your time, let's get to the video. So, hey Narinder, it's so good to finally connect with you. I've been going through your sketches ever since I've seen your Instagram profile. I've been going through a lot of content that is out there about you. And I really love the story. I've really loved your journey, and that is why I wanted to talk to you today to sort of share it with my whole audience as well. So it's so great to connect with you.
Likewise, it's a real pleasure to connect. We're very lucky that social media and the internet allows us to connect across Spaceship Earth so quickly and to so many people. And I've always said that, Instagram for me is a wonderful tool because you can be inspired by so many people during the day, but given a chance to inspire other people, it's also a wonderful tool.
I've sort of planned this conversation to sort of get you talking about your journey, like since after college, and how your journey has been going since. Let me just dive right into my first question and let's get this started. I wanted to ask you about your education. So where did you do your bachelor's from?
So I studied in Leeds. I was born and brought up in Leeds. Well, I was kind of quite restricted in terms of the universities that I could apply to. I was told that I would never be able to really study architecture because of academic grades and subjects that I've chosen and so on. To be very honest, my options were limited. And I decided to stay in Leeds next to family, and I studied at Leeds Metropolitan University, it was called, very close to home.
So after you graduated, pretty early on, you sort of ended up at Foster Plus Partners. So I sort of wanted to know, how did you sort of end up there?
Architecture for me has kind of been something, as a child, I found drawing and making was around me all the time, and I didn't realize how blessed I was to have that within my family environment. And then as I was growing up, I realized that another part of my upbringing was to what we call as Sikhs, we call seva, which is essentially making a difference to people's lives. Architecture really encompassed all of that. And so then when I was looking for somewhere to work, or looking for someone within the field of architecture who's really making a difference on the planet, really making a difference to people's lives through design and through changing environments, changing our cities, changing the world, with a consciousness for sustainability and looking after Spaceship Earth, I found Foster & Partners, and I found Norman. And it wasn't an immediate choice. I was lucky in the same way that I'm speaking to you today. One of the directors at the time came all the way from London to Leeds to give a lecture on Foster & Partners and what we were doing. And I was really overwhelmed. The lecture hall was packed. There was people outside. There was new screens set up so that surplus audiences could see the lecture. It was really a major event and a great thing for someone from London, from such a big practice, to come up to our School of Architecture and speak there. I was very inspired, and I was encouraged by one of the tutors at the time, who came out and kicked me as I was having a cup of tea outside after the lecture. And he said, "You should go and ask that guy for a job." And I was trembling. I remember my knees shaking as I walked up to the guy who'd just given the lecture and asked him if I could have a year placement at Foster and Partners. So it's really kind of a coincidence really for me that someone who I'd really admired and in Norman and the practice had kind of reached out, and I was reaching out at the same time, which I guess is similar to what we're doing today. And that opportunity didn't happen immediately. I was told to finish my undergraduate and then apply to the practice, which I did. And the rest is history, really. I got the job on a Friday morning. I'd been waiting weeks and weeks to get the answer. I'd called nearly every day to see if I'd been successful. And when I got the call on the Friday morning, I decided to move immediately. And so I moved on the Saturday and I started working on the Monday in London. So it's a very quick transition, but it was real kind of following my dreams and following my judgment within the field that we're in, that I was taking the right path, and I could and that path was reaching out to me at the same time. So it's a lot of coincidences at the same time, a little bit of serendipity.
So let's talk a little bit about your journey through the firm. So you were the youngest ever associate at Foster Partners, and today you are a senior partner there. So tell us about the journey and how did your role change in the company as you sort of went up the ranks?
Right. Well, I joined the practice, with all my sketchbooks and measured drawings and portfolio from university. And all that time I'd been drawing by hand. And I joined the practice at a time really when everyone was still drawing by hand. But through my sketchbooks, which were kind of study sketchbooks in places like Berlin and Rome on study trips in second year and third year, I'd been recognized within my interview as someone who could perhaps visualize space, perhaps visualize our buildings, and take on a role alongside Norman and a few others to work on many projects in sketching and visualizing space. For me, I just took that for granted. I thought all architects must be able to sketch. They must be able to draw and visualize space and draw in perspective. Of course they should, because at the end of the day, we're kind of curating people's lives through three-dimensional space. And how can you do that just with 2D drawing? So I just took it for granted. And perhaps I was naive and just passionate about drawing and couldn't see any obstacles. But that's what I pursued in those early years. And then I found that Norman was the architect I thought I wanted to be. He was a designer, a fantastic businessman, a people person, but also an incredible draftsman. So I was very, very fortunate that I could learn from him. And I remember very clearly on that weekend that I moved to London from Leeds, I was reading a book that my father gave me, which was from the 60s, a very old book. And the lesson from the story was really that one word can make an entire difference to your whole life. The story was about someone who wanted to work with Thomas Edison, the famous inventor, and not for him. And the difference between the word with and for was, epic, really, and made quite an impact on me. So on my bus journey to London, I remember that weekend very, very clearly thinking, I want to work with Norman Foster. I don't want to work for him. And I remember it to this day because ever since then I've worked with Norman and side by side. And I think it's really a mental attitude that can really define your career from there on. So from there, really with our shared passion of drawing, sketching, designing, I was able to form quite a strong bond with Norman and work together across every project in the practice. That, of course, that level of responsibility as it grew gives you some professional responsibility within the practice, which of course comes with rewards of promotions and so on. But really the promotions are irrelevant, really. I think one must be performing the role of an associate before you become an associate. You must be, you don't need the words and the accolades on a business card to define your position, define your role. It must come through what you're achieving, what you're producing, and the impact you're having. And I think for anyone within our practice who's kind of rising up the ranks and really making an impact on the practice, it's always a case of passion following their ambitions. Rather than just something that's to do with progression, career progression as such. But so my love of drawing and my kind of childlike thinking of achieving those goals and achieving a position, defying those voices as a child that told me that I would not be able to find a career through drawing, I think drove me to do exactly the opposite of what they said. And I found myself within a practice, a world-class practice, where I could draw all day and every day with probably one of the best mentors that I could find. Incredible team, just feeding my energy and feeding my love of architecture and drawing. And that's really been the ingredients and the magic behind what we've achieved today as a practice and where I am personally within the practice today.
Sketching and drawing, whether by hand or digitally, is it the process of designing, or do those sketches and drawings also sort of end up at the client's table as well to sort of show them, or is it always just renders that end up there?
No, so all of our sketches and drawings, everything we produce, all of our thought process is usually presented to clients. Because like I said, you can't just come up with a render and a photoreal image without the thought process behind it. And so at the very early stages, we use the sketches with clients to ask questions. So we draw diagrams and we say, is this what you meant or not? So in a way, I like to call it, we question everything, but we also question the question. And we, as Norman would say, never take the obvious for granted. So when we're given a challenge by a client, sketching and drawing is the quickest way of drawing something and saying, is this what you meant? Have we got this right? And if you can do that side by side with a client, it's incredibly engaging. And in the same way that I said that the difference between with and for in my career, we like to work with our clients. We don't like to work for them. Of course, when you get to a stage where you are presenting to a new audience, or you're competing in a competition that might be anonymous, and the requirements are very strict, and they've asked for lots of photorealistic renders, we need to fast forward and get to that stage incredibly quickly. But still, the thought process behind those renders is always with a sketch. More often than not, nearly every drawing that I think I've produced is presented to clients. And I've had to develop kind of a mentality really over the years where it doesn't really kind of change the way you draw, it doesn't change the way you think. There's no difference in the way you draw to explore something in a sketchbook and the way you draw to present to a client. All of it is the language of drawing, whether it's photoreal or whether it's through a quick sketch. In a way, a quick sketch can be a very quick conversation. It can be just a moment of questioning, or it can be a moment of sharing a thought or an idea. And the more detailed drawings are longer, more considered debates and conversations with so much more detail, so many different voices. And really, I think the power of all forms of drawing, whether it's sketching, drawing, or visualizing through the computer, is combining your thoughts with those of your team, bringing thoughts together, bringing questions together, and putting them all onto the paper. But pretty much everything we draw is shared with our clients. Sometimes live, which is even more special.
Now, this is one thing that I try to understand from everybody that I interview, and this sort of to understand when somebody joins a so-called star architects firm. There's always this notion that, especially at your younger years there, you would not sort of design anything. You would sort of just maybe be detailing out what is given to you and not actively participating in the design. So I sort of wanted to ask, especially for younger architects and younger graduates who enter the firm, what is the collaboration process like there? Do you actively collaborate, or do you take some time and learn what's going on and then sort of start?
In larger practices, I think there'll always be a structure that allows the process of design to run smoothly. We in our practice have quite open studio spaces. We have very open in meeting rooms and kind of design review spaces. So there's a real kind of democracy of ideas, and within that environment, it means that the youngest of people are allowed to step forward within that environment because of that openness, because of the physical openness. It encourages the youngest of people to step forward and express ideas. I think the challenges when you're younger are that, or you're new to the practice, is just obviously learning how that environment is constructed, how the process works. Of course, understanding the way the business works and the speed at which the projects are running. It can feel like you're trying to jump onto a fast-moving train at times. But you have to really look out for the opportunities that are there for you to express your own ideas and step forward with your own thoughts. And it can be difficult to do it within a physical review. It can be difficult to do it, when you're with senior members of staff, or you're standing next to Norman for the very first time. It can be quite a daunting experience. But one thing I've really learned from Norman is that there's no real hierarchy other than experience. So regardless of how long you've been in the practice, regardless of what your name is or what experience you've developed, the only real hierarchy is through experience. And so the youngest person in the team may have the most amount of experience on a certain project, of a certain place, of a certain type of design, or a certain even knowledge of a certain client. And that person we encourage to come forward with those ideas. I would encourage people to look for practices to work for that have that kind of physical environment that encourages that democracy and that meritocratic environment where you can put ideas forward.
So speaking of Norman, what is Norman Foster like to work with? Are there any stories that you can tell us that can shine a light on how his demeanor or approach towards designs and people in the office is like?
I've kind of known Norman as a colleague, but also as a friend for many years. And you realise that you learn from people professionally, but you also learn from them by watching how they are as a person, or how they are as with friends and family as well. And Norman's probably one of the most hardworking and person I've ever met. I think if I could achieve what he achieves in his day today at the age of 85, I'd be very pleased, and I've got many years to go until I get to that age. But his whole day is about performance. His whole day is about persistence. His whole day is about perfectionism and achieving the best, whether that's something that's to do with design, to do with the practice, to do with inspiring other people. It might be giving a talk, to a different kind of performance as a team. It might be cycling with his friends, or it might be skiing in a team of 100 or several hundred in a race. Everything for him is about teamwork. Everything about him is about finding perfection, finding precision in everything. And so I've been very fortunate to kind of observe that for many years. And I think for me that's been the most inspiring thing about him, is just learning that really architecture and what we do as designers or artists is not just about between 9 o'clock and 6 o'clock in the evening, but it's really about your entire life. Everything can make a difference, and everything affects, your personal life affects your professional life. Surrounding yourself with the right people is something that Norman's very good at, being able to be quite open and honest that we're only as good as ourselves if we try to achieve our ultimate goals. You can only be as good as one person. But if you surround yourself with incredible people, with people that are better than you, collectively, you're just an incredible force. So there's been wonderful things I've learned in the past, but I continue to learn from Norman in how he works and lives.
That's amazing. What is your favorite project to come out from the studio?
Gosh, that's a very difficult one. I think I'm very fortunate to live in London. London's an incredible city. I think the British Museum, the Great Court at the British Museum, has got to be one of my favourite places in London. It's a great example of how architecture is not just about meeting brief requirements, but it's for looking for opportunities that didn't exist before. It's about finding opportunities within a problem, and finding opportunities that other people might not have seen. And the Great Court is exactly that. It's not just looking at the refurbishment of a building of a certain period, but it's also looking at what's happened over time and how we've affected not just the physical fabric of a building, but people's lives through that time. And the Great Court was really the removal of elements that have been added to the British Museum over many decades. You learn that it's not always about what you add, it's sometimes about what you take away. And the Great Court was created in that manner. We removed things which were added to the reading room, and we discovered this amazing space that becomes a 24-hour, all-season environment for families and friends to enjoy. And often as a family we go there and have a cup of tea and cake, and the children run around and play. We don't look at any exhibitions, and then we come home. It's just a wonderful public space. So it's got to be one of my favourite places in London for sure.
Alright, so let's move to our last question for the day. And even though you've given us a lot of advice throughout the conversation, is there any specific advice that you would give to both? One is people who are looking to architecture as a profession, and two, to people who are maybe about to graduate or are fresh graduates.
Yeah, I think, look, we're in really difficult times globally at the moment, because I really feel for people who are graduating right now and in times of where the economy of our countries is not doing particularly well, right? But you know, I always think when lots of people might have their head down, it's an opportunity to see really wonderful things on the horizon. If you can't get a job within architecture, it's sometimes perhaps an opportunity to explore other things. So for those people who are just graduating and thinking of finding work, it's a good opportunity before you start that journey to learn something else too. I think if I could go back to the moment I graduated, or even whilst I was studying architecture, or before I started my undergraduate, I might have perhaps worked with a photographer. I might have perhaps learnt how to weld and make things and fabricate things out of metal. Might have tried to work with a sculptor or an artist for some time. I might have explored the art of making a little bit more than you kind of learn through architecture school or through the rest of your education. So for those who are graduating, I think see opportunities to continue learning and kind of move left and right in terms of the profession. You know, a lot of architects nowadays don't necessarily want to build buildings, but they want to become artists, they want to become visualizers, they want to become lighting designers, landscape architects, and so on. There's a really wonderful flexibility and freedom in the profession. For those who are starting to study architecture, we might have said this already, but just not consider it a profession where you're on one journey, but kind of be mindful of keeping your mind open to the rest of the world. And I think traveling, you know, learning photography, sketching, all adds to your experience as an architect, particularly when you're studying. You know, successful architecture is where you've really improved people's lives, whether it's in a physical space or in a dialogue, in a kind of improve the way in which people live. If we can leave the world a better place than in which we found it, I think then you'll be quite a successful architect in the end. Looking at sustainability, looking at the way we consume, looking at the way we can have more of an impact as architects than just the singular building, just the more than the infrastructure around it, but looking at the embedded energies within materials, looking at agriculture, looking at the wider planet, looking at the way we're connected through physical and digital space, I think gives us clues to what the future might be ahead of us. In the same way that we're having this conversation in different time zones and many thousand miles away, we're in a very, very different place to where I started my career. So you must be very open-minded in how the future might change around you.
So thank you so much for that advice, and I think it really sort of catches you've struck on what the essence of architecture is all about, and being an architect is all about. So thank you for that, and also thank you for this interview. Thank you for taking out the time and doing this for the audience here, and yeah, just thank you for all your insight.
Thank you. It's a real pleasure, and even though I was born in the UK, I find India is certainly my home, and to reconnect with you and to connect with the audience is a real privilege, and hopefully we've inspired people together today.
That's an amazing story. One thing, so sort of as I sort of interview people as well, I sort of realized whether it was Mariana, whether it was Viviano, ending up at those firms wherever they ended up at, it was sort of them taking that leap and taking that chance.
I'll tell you a story. I went to Jaipur. We were looking at a project in Mumbai to redevelop Dharavi, one of the largest slums or informal settlements in Asia, I guess. As part of that project, we thought we must go to Jaipur and see how the city was planned and constructed, or little sketches and diagrams. Everything is a kind of a conversational piece. And so sometimes these kind of drawings are done without thinking, and I think that's the kind of zone you need to get yourself into.
Hey guys, I hope you liked that video. If you did, don't forget to like, share and subscribe. If you wish to support this channel, you can do so through Patreon. For as little as $2, you can help me create these kind of videos and the wide variety you see on this channel. Anyway, I hope you like this video and I hope you have a great day. I will see you guys soon with another video. Bye bye.